At long last, it is now time to reopen Gorillagate. Towards the end of last season, I did tease that we had more to say on the subject, and as I disappeared earlier in the year, I left my team a picture of the updated board, which they hopefully uploaded in my absence. So if you saw the new pieces to the puzzle and were wondering what they meant, then this is the video for you. And just in case the title didn't make it clear enough, this is part 7 of an ongoing investigation. So if you are not up to speed, I highly recommend you go back to a video titled Gorillagate Exposed and work your way up from there. Or else this video might make even less sense without the full and proper context. So, the first few changes we've made to the board are things we've already covered that I figured should be on there. I've changed the picture for Kayla, Harambe's mother by the way, to the one of her giving advice to former President George W. Bush. Partly because I was never entirely certain if the original was even a picture of her, but mostly because it gives a better picture of what we are dealing with. Next up, we've got an image of Harambe's half-brother Nzinga, who I talked about in part 3, as the sole survivor of a triumvirate that consisted of himself as well as Caesar and Harambe, leaving this guy as the next in line to lead the inevitable primate uprising and a prime target for both the deep state globalists and the international communist conspiracy. So keep an eye on this one. We also now have a line connecting Donald Trump to the Soviet hybridization experiments. As I speculated in part 4, and perhaps explained a little better in the second set of retractions, might need a third one soon, he may or may not be a third-generation human orangutan hybrid that was created in a Russian laboratory. So these are things that we already knew, and can find out more about in their respective videos. So without further ado, let's set sail into the unknown and address the new items in semi-chronological order, shall we? Let us give a warm Alternative Factors welcome to Shabani the Gorilla, who was born in the Netherlands in 1996, but grew up down under in our very own Taronga Zoo in Sydney. Very little attention was paid to him during the first 10 years of his life, and let's face it, he hardly stood apart from your average bloke. But all of that changed in 2007 when he got himself a transfer to Higashiyama Zoo in Nagoya, Japan. Probably wasn't quite like that. He first caught the public eye by tightrope walking that same year, but is currently best known for his looks. As the Daily Mail reported, the handsome gorilla driving Japanese girls mad. Australian-raised ape finds fame as women flock to the zoo to see him because he's so good-looking. By 2015, traffic at Higashiyama Zoo had significantly increased due to the large number of young women who had come to see him and even snap a picture. Many complimented his looks, some even going as far as to compare him to George Clooney. Although I think that's just a little unfair to Shabani, who earned himself the nickname Ikemen, which roughly translates to handsome guy. I hope I'm getting all this pronunciation right, by the way. Now the reason I put quotation marks on his birth earlier is because I took him to be one of these human-gorilla hybrids, possibly engineered to be so oddly handsome in order to encourage interbreeding and result in even more hybrids. On one hand, I have yet to find any common relatives between him and Harambe, But on the other hand, there's likely more than one hybrid gorilla family, which would account for the likes of Bantu. On the other hand, it has been noted that Shabani does not behave like your average gorilla. And most telling of all, on the fourth hand, because that's how many gorillas have, is his rise to power, which suggests perhaps more to his intended purpose than I had originally speculated. Now, as Shabani took the world and social media by storm, Higashiyama-zu sought to capitalize on this. He not only got promoted to their spokesman, but he even had his own DVD film and candy line. Then, in early 2016, he entered the public sector and rose to become the spokesman for the city of Nagoya, even featuring in a civil service recruitment campaign.
俺はシャバーニ。ここで毎日たくさんの人間を見てきた。あんた、未来にときめいているか？奴らと一緒に輝いてみないか？
妥協してしまうと、事故につながってしまう可能性もありますので、私たちの作業が重要だなと。
一緒に過ごしていきたいなっていうふうに思っています。
こいつら全員名古屋市の職員だ。いい顔してるだろう。集え、名古屋へ輝け、人間たちよ。
シャバーニご飯だよ。
一緒に働こうぜ。
So there you have it, a gorilla running propaganda for the state. Do I need to say any more? Well, there is. According to the Japan Times, a city official said, "We would like to recruit someone like Shabani who is strong, generous, and nice to residents." Now this brings us back to the original 1929 Soviet hybridization experiments carried out by Ilya Ivanovich Ivanov. Alright, after they surfaced in the 90s, many speculated on why he wanted to create human primate hybrids, and why the state had backed him so enthusiastically. One of the reasons that Russian historian Alexander Etikin suggested to New Scientist magazine was the aim was to match people to the socialist design of Soviet society. Primates were seen as ideal workers in service to the state, and it appears that Japan, at least in this respect, seems to have adopted the ideals of its closest and largest neighbor. Shabani's true allegiance have yet to be determined, but perhaps time will tell. And one last thing I will say about him before we move on, actually segueing into the next item, is that as Shabani rose to power in late 2015, as documented earlier, it was believed that his popularity would increase exponentially during the following year of 2016, being the year of the monkey. So was anyone really surprised that that year turned into a circus, clowns and all? But seriously, in part one, I had said that this whole thing was in motion for a long time, but who would have thought that we would be dealing with an ancient Chinese prophecy here? I mean, honestly, they saw this coming for how long? Well, this is awkward. I actually don't have that fact and can't really look it up here since I'm off the grid. I guess I'll just tell my editor to throw it up on the screen in front of me and play the audio of me saying how long the Chinese calendar has been in use for once I have that information, and nobody needs to know about this little blunder.
The Chinese calendar's origins can be traced as far back as the 14th century BCE.
And all this time, they never thought to tell the rest of the world? Because it worked to their advantage. It was all part of their communist plan. But Connor, I hear people ask, how is this relevant after 2016? Well, as I talked about in part 6, the outrage, the scandal surrounding the Harambe incident was this microcosm, the perfect storm of our collective lack of empathy for one another, our failure to grasp the bigger picture, and short attention span in our society. But back to the actual Gorillagate case. You might also notice a line linking Harambe's grandmother, Josephine, to Donald Trump. And that is because I now have reason to believe that he called for her execution. Now remember, this is Josephine we're talking about, the matriarch of Miami Zoo, whose parents were unknown, and depending on who you ask, was born in either 1964, 1 year after the book Planet of the Apes was published, or 1967, a year before the film adaptation. As I deduced in part 3, the earlier date could have been when she was created, and the latter was when she escaped the Russian laboratory and defected to the United States. So Josephine was perhaps one of Trump's oldest rivals, and after the passings of Kayla, Caesar, Moja, Harambe, and Bantu, Josephine might well have been the biggest threat left standing in early 2017. In order to consolidate their power, the communists needed to deal with her, and fast. But they did not want to create another Harambe situation. So instead of trying to make it look like an accident, they simply had her euthanized. On the 18th of January 2017, 2 days before the inauguration of the 45th President of the United States, Donald John Trump. Then, they went out of their way to make this event the biggest spectacle they possibly could.
3 Doors Down.
Somebody once told me the world is gonna roll me out.
And flood the media cycle with so much talk about crowd size that the passing of this American hero would go almost completely unsung. But I remember you and your sacrifice, Josephine. We found further proof of the connection a year later in Michael Wolff's book, Fire and Fury. Credit to Twitter user @PixelatedBoat for being the first to find the following excerpt and bring it to public attention. Ahem. On his first night in the White House, President Trump complained that the TV in his bedroom was broken because it did not have the Gorilla channel. Trump seemed to be under the impression that a TV channel existed that screened nothing but gorilla-based content 24 hours a day. To appease Trump, White House staff compiled a number of gorilla documentaries into a makeshift gorilla channel broadcast into Trump's bedroom from a hastily constructed transmission tower on the South Lawn. Trump, however, was unhappy with the channel they had created, moaning that it was boring because the gorillas aren't fighting. Staff then edited out all the parts of the documentaries where the gorillas aren't hitting each other, and at last the president was satisfied. On some days, he'll watch the Gorilla channel for 17 hours straight, an insider told me. He kneels in front of the TV, with his face about 4 inches from the screen, and says encouraging things to the gorillas, like, "The way you just hit that other gorilla was good. I think he thinks the gorillas can hear him." So how did Donald celebrate his victory? In the typical Trump fashion of mocking his defeated opponents, of course. And further proof of Gorillagate and the international communist conspiracy can be found on the 13th of May 2018. As I talked about in my parting statement, that Trump had let the Chinese phone manufacturer ZTE off the hook after his Commerce Department had penalized them for violating US sanctions and doing business with Iran and North Korea, as well as selling devices in the West that could be remotely accessed via a backdoor system. What I would like to add on to this is that in that video, I also speculated on some level of cooperation between the globalists and the communists, and a clear example can be found in the very same instance. According to the Reuters report that I cited, ZTE committed these offences in 2010. This happened under the watch of Barack Hussein Obama. And all we got from those globalists in response was posturing. I mean, sure, they condemned these actions and they banned their devices from military bases, but more or less gave them a free pass as punitive measures were never sought. It wasn't until 2018 that Trump's Commerce Department finally cracked down on ZTE, at least until the communist puppet Donald Trump himself stepped in and told them no. So shame on Obama for not going after them, and dare I say credit to the unhappy few within the Trump administration who are actually trying to do their jobs. And now for the most recent piece of the puzzle, which I only just found out about when I went into town for a supply run the other day. And if anyone still thinks I'm crazy, Coco the gorilla, who was famous for her communication skills, passed away at the age of 46 on the 19th of June this year, just over 2 weeks after I went into hiding. The Gorilla Foundation's Chief Development Officer, Joy Chesborough, has informed the Times that Coco went peacefully, and that despite her advanced age, her death was unexpected. Right? Unexpected. Like the deaths of Kayla, Caesar, Moja, and Bantu. So far, the only expected deaths I've seen of these gorillas have been the deliberate ones of Harambe and Josephine. But we're not done yet, because the Huffington Post has further added, the cause of death wasn't released. Coco would have turned 47 on July 4th. Now, why wouldn't they make the cause of death public? And why did it happen so close to her birthday? Was she planning on turning her birthday speech into a massive truth bomb to drop on Independence Day, no less? I guess we'll never know. I'm Connor O'Loughlin, and this is Alternative Factors. Until next time, stay woke, people.
Sipping on some Bombay.